Doomsday falls, zombies roam freely. My name is Jimo. The protagonists of other families are all awakening systems, pushing them all the way, or mutate, awaken abilities. But when it comes to me, why don't you just give me a house? Big brother, it's already the end of the world. Do you want me to collect rent from the zombies? But as time passed, Jimo gradually realized that his house seemed to have some special functions. Okay, then I'll be happy to be a renter. Oh, by the way, my name is Jimo, but I'm not lonely. Chapter 1. The Rental Company in the Apocalypse. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. On a summer night, colorful neon lights flicker among the towering reinforced concrete. The streets are bustling with cars and pedestrians rushing along, looking down at white-collar workers on their phones, a couple holding hands and laughing together. Students who finish evening self-study. People are walking on different paths in life, either firm or confused, towards the direction of progress. But what they don't know is that all the honors, pressures, goals they currently possess are about to undergo earth-shattering changes. Just tonight. Huck off, a man emitting a foul odor walked unsteadily on the sidewalk, as if he was about to fall. In the next moment, his head drooped, making it difficult to see his face clearly, and his mouth let out unconscious moans, as if growling or crying. The strong odor kept the pedestrians around him at a distance, and then quickly walked over with disgust, covering their noses, afraid that the unpleasant smell would come onto them. Finally, as he passed by a trash can, the shaky man fell to the ground, his face covered in dirty and messy hair tightly pressed against the ground, but the man lay straight and motionless, but the stench on that body is getting stronger and stronger. At first, people thought it was just an alcoholic who drank too much, until the man suddenly jumped up from the ground, stared at a pair of gray-white eyes, roared and bit a pedestrian's neck. The virus is spreading rapidly. City C, on the 7th day of the zombie virus outbreak. Gmo stretched lazily and sat up from the bed, with a comfortable appearance that did not resemble a survivor who had lived for 7 days in the apocalypse. Good morning, sir. An electronic synthesizer suddenly sounded in Jimo's ear. Good morning, butler. Gmo said while wearing clothes. According to your statement, from today on, I can go out and explore the city in search for survival supplies, right? Yes, sir. Based on your training materials and physical tests over the past few days, you have developed the most basic ability to survive the apocalypse, so from now on, your survival problems will need to be solved by yourself. The electronic synthesizer rang out again in the room. Jimo pursed his lips and walked to the restaurant to start eating. He was originally just an ordinary sophomore student, occasionally working part-time to earn some pocket money. 7 days ago, when the virus broke out, he just took on a ride and took an old man from the city center to the suburbs. As soon as he arrived in the suburbs, a lost truck rushed straight towards him. When he regained consciousness, he had already appeared in this house. There is only one living person in the whole house, Jimo, and there is also an artificial intelligence system that claims to be the butler. With Jimo's exploration and the butler's introduction, he found that this house did not seem to be a product of this era. Leaving aside the invisible artificial intelligence of butler, the first floor where Jimo is currently located has a total of 101 rooms. Jimo is currently in room 0, also known as the main control room. Its interior layout is no different from the luxurious presidential suite of a 5-star hotel, except for the display panel that is the size of a wall in the bedroom, where Jimo can monitor everything in the entire building. And rooms 1 to 100 are called guest rooms by the butler. Each guest room is about 100 square meters in size, and all the living furniture inside is complete, comparable to a typical homestay hotel. And this is only the content of the first floor of this house. According to the butler, this house has a total of 12 floors, and Jimo is the owner of this house, that is, the building owner. Jimo has the highest control over all the facilities in this house. But currently, Jimo can only unlock a portion of the permissions on the first and second floors. As for the permissions on other floors, the butler's statement is that when Jimo meets the unlocking conditions, the butler will naturally give a prompt. On the first day of awakening, due to a lack of signal from his phone and inexplicably appearing in a strange high-tech building, especially with a life form similar to artificial intelligence. Jimo had suggested more than once to go outside the building to take a look and search for supplies. But the butler's answer was, the detection results show that the owner's physical fitness is too low, and the survival rate in the apocalypse is 0%. It is recommended that the owner undergo basic training before starting. So for the next 6 days, Jimo spent all his time in the training room on the second floor, fighting against the zombies simulated by the butler, eating food and water that he didn't know how the butler had transformed, and gradually becoming stronger between reality and illusion. During the 6-day training, Jimo also gained a deeper understanding of some of the functions of the building he is currently able to use, such as the 100 guest rooms. The 100 guest rooms are actually meant to be used for living, but the difference is that as long as a creature is allowed to stay in the room by Jimo, the butler will draw a certain amount of rent for Jimo based on their comprehensive ability evaluation, and store it in the panel of room 0. Jimo can use the rent to purchase various goods through the shopping mall inside the panel. After listening to the butler's introduction, Jimo twitched his lips. Grandma, in their novels, the end of the world is all about a system and evolution. When it comes to me, why don't you give me a sweet? They transformed into the strongest male protagonist all the way to the boss, while I transformed into the strongest renter, relying on rent collection to survive until the end. And whether one can find a living person to live in their own house is still unknown. But since there is a problem, it's better than nothing. Jimo has also read many novels about the end of the world before. Although it seems that this house doesn't have any system mutations or other violent elements, at least, he can still make a living, right? Besides, there are still so many floors that haven't been unlocked. It's possible that one day we'll have a high-tech floor, so we'll just take off in place. After breakfast, Jimo dressed neatly and stood at the entrance of the building. He is wearing a special small earphone in his left ear. After leaving the building, the butler will use this earphone to keep in touch with Jimo. Considering that the owner is exploring for the first time, the best route has been planned for the owner. There is a small supermarket 100 meters to the left when going out. The owner is currently located far from the city center, and according to the system analysis, there is a high probability that there are still supplies there. The cold reminder sound of the butler sounded in the earphones. Okay, Jimo took a deep breath and tightened the large mountaineering bag on his back, opening the door. Perhaps due to the sparsity of people in the suburbs, there was not a single zombie outside the door. The morning sunlight slanted down, making Jimo suddenly feel a bit confused, whether this was the end of the world. But the thick smoke rising from various parts of the city in the distance after the explosion made Jimo have to admit that the end has indeed come. Looking back at the high-tech building that looked no different from a regular office building, Jimo sighed at his luck in his heart and ran towards the supermarket direction mentioned by the butler. Although he can't figure out many things now, he knows one thing very well, and that is, he wants to live. Chapter 2. Fighting and Awakening. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Killing zombies is like dressing up in women's clothing. Only 0 and countless times. Jimo, the streets were a bit eerie, with no sound of traffic coming and going, and no wind at all. As if everything around me had come to a standstill. Jimo could even hear his heavy panting. Sir, don't be nervous. The butler's cold electronic voice came from the earphones. The store is ahead, please remain vigilant and remember your training content these days. The shop mentioned by the butler is not far from the building, rather than being a shop, but it is actually a private small shop with a small storefront. The glass door of the convenience store was half open, and the sunlight hit the glass, reflecting light that made people feel dizzy. Jimo pushed open the door and walked in. The glass door didn't make a creaking sound like in horror movies, it seems to be of good quality. The small shop is also quiet, with products neatly arranged on the shelves, seemingly not looted by survivors. Jimo glanced around briefly and did not find any human or zombie figures. Lucky enough, Jimo breathed a sigh of relief and walked to the shelf to start packing supplies into his bag. Biscuits, water, canned food. Jimo even flipped over 2 tool axes, not knowing why they were placed in the small shop. After a search, although there was still some inventory on the shelves, the hiking bags were already full. Jimo planned to go back first and keep these supplies for a while before moving them over. Jimo pinned one axe to his waist and held the other in his hand. He lowered his head and was about to grab his bag when suddenly a sound of an object falling to the ground came from behind. Inema. Jimo was startled in his heart and rolled in a bent posture, then looked in the direction of the sound. I saw a hunched figure standing in an extremely twisted position at the position where Jimo was. Zombies. Jimo trembled all over, even though he had been fighting against this thing in the virtual space of the butler for 6 days. However, when he truly faced this thing in reality, his hands still couldn't help but tremble. Zombies are not much different from humans overall, except that their bodies no longer have intact skin, and their faces and hands are covered in pieces of rotten flesh. In some places, even white bones can be seen. There was still a faint smell of corpse emanating from all over my body. The zombie let out a roar, shrugged its nose, and a pair of gray-white eyes aimed at Jimo again. "Sir, calm down, you don't need to be afraid of it," the butler's voice rang out through his earphones again. "You've fought it before, think about the training you've had in the past 6 days, believe in yourself." I know," Jimo struggled to swallow his saliva, his voice slightly trembling, and his right knuckles turned slightly white from grabbing the axe with force. At the end of the day, he is just a college student. He is only 20 years old, and the lives he has lost in his hands, apart from his billions of descendants, are nothing more than flies and mosquitoes. He is not a veteran, nor is he an invincible male lead who has been cheating. He is just an ordinary person, just like you and me. Roar! The zombie let out a low roar again and rushed towards Jimo, but was stumbled by the mountaineering bag on the ground. Roar. The zombie's speed was fast, but its body reactions were not coordinated. This stumbling changed its original position and charged straight towards Jimo with the momentum of a rocket hammer. "Sir." There is a miniature camera on the earphones, so everything that Jimo can see can also be seen by the butler. 6 days of training ultimately worked. Faced with the rushing zombie, Jimo had no fear anymore. He lifted his right hand and struck the zombie's cheek with an axe. I don't know if it's because the decaying muscle tissue is too soft, or because in a moment of urgency, Jimo's blow was too strong. With this axe, half of the zombie's cheek, along with the jawbone, tongue, and some skin and flesh on the neck, all fell down along the edge of the axe. Bang! The zombie's head collided with the nearby shelf, but it stood up again, tearing at Jimo with its bloody throat and leaking throat, and roaring uncontrollably. Shit! Jimo didn't hesitate and kicked the zombie's belly with a flying foot. With his left hand, he pulled off the axe from his waist and struck at the remaining half of the zombie's head. Poochie, brain splattered, and under tremendous force, an eyeball squeezed out from the decaying eye socket, bouncing on the ground with some nerve tissue, and was then stomped out by Jimo, who followed closely. Jimo didn't notice these things, he swung one axe after another onto the fallen zombie, his mind blank. Fear, cowardice, trembling. All the thoughts from earlier disappeared, and now there was only one voice in his mind. Live. I want to live. His cells are trembling, his soul is trembling, is it joyful? No. That's just a roar of longing for life, a cry of disdain for fear. He wants to live, see the sun tomorrow, find his parents and friends he cares about, and kill all these zombies. "Sir, that's enough," the butler's voice rang out again. Jimo finally stopped mechanically waving his arms, panting heavily. The previous zombie had already been chopped into a mixture of bone residue and meat foam by him, and Jimo was half kneeling in front of this puddle, covered in dirty blood, like a butcher walking out of a slaughterhouse. Sir, are you okay? The butler's voice remained cold, but this time it seemed to carry a hint of vague concern. I'm fine. Jimo's hands holding the axe were slightly numb from excessive force, and he couldn't let go of the axe for a moment. Jimo took a deep breath and casually wiped the axe on his right hand in a barely clean area before putting it back on his waist. The other axe had already made a hole in the fierce chopping just now, and it was a glorious sacrifice. Jimo pulled a piece of cloth, wiped away the splattered flesh and blood on his backpack, and carried it back again. Once the tense nerves are relaxed, there are waves of slight dizziness. Sir, your heartbeat is a bit too fast. It's okay. Jimo took a few deep breaths, and the dizziness in his mind gradually subsided. Pushing open the store door, I returned to the street. Wow! A faint cry came to Jimo's ears, but it suddenly stopped. Butler, did you hear any sound just now? Jimo suddenly became a little excited, not even sure if the sound was his own hallucination. Sir, according to the map, there is a kindergarten next to this convenience store. The communication equipment you are currently wearing is relatively rudimentary, and I cannot accurately determine if there are any survivors inside. Considering your current situation, I do not recommend you to explore this kindergarten at this moment. Chapter 3. Survivors in Kindergarten. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Some human nature, even in the apocalypse, I don't want to lose. Jimo, I asked if you heard crying. Jimo interrupted the butler's words. After a brief silence, the butler's voice rang out again. I heard it. Jimo took 2 steps forward and happened to be able to see the small playground in the kindergarten through the fence gap, as well as a few wooden horses and slides. At this time, it was not yet noon, and the kindergarten was quiet, with a peaceful appearance of time. Jimo was very conflicted. It had been 7 days in a row, and he had never seen a living person. If it weren't for the intelligent life of a butler, he wouldn't have had anyone to talk to for these 7 days. A large part of the reason he went out to explore was to find survivors. If he missed this opportunity, he didn't know how long he would have to wait, or how long he would have to survive alone. But at the same time, he also understood that with his current strength, there was only 1 axe left, and he was strong enough to survive in the face of 2 zombies. Although he has just overcome his psychological barriers, who knows how many zombies there are in this kindergarten. Still saving people. If you don't put yourself inside, it's already burning high incense. Let's go. Jimo looked at it for a long time and finally became determined. He turned around and walked down the same path as before. As if destined, just as Jimo turned around and was about to leave, the sound of the table rubbing against the ground came again from the house near the street in the kindergarten. In an instant, Jimo stood in the same place. He was so eager to find someone who could speak, whether it was for the rent the butler offered or to not be lonely and go crazy in his future life. Furthermore, it must be mentioned that the 6-day simulated combat did give Jimo some confidence, especially after he completely let go of his psychological barriers and chopped down a zombie just now. This confidence became stronger and stronger. Squeak! There was another sound of friction, as if the people inside were moving the table to block the door. Jimo closed and opened his eyes, and his gaze suddenly became sharp. Turn around and run towards the fence in the kindergarten. Sir! Sir! The butler's shout came from the earphones. Jimo remained silent, clutching the top of the railing with both hands and exerting force with both feet. He appeared in the kindergarten during a landing and takeoff. Butler, using your data analysis, is there a high probability that I will survive this trip? Jimo looked around and saw that it was a very small kindergarten. There was no one in the security room at the entrance, and the door was open. It seemed that the security guard inside was coming out in a hurry and could not come back. After conservative analysis, your survival probability this time is between 30% and 40%, which is due to the uncertainty of the number of infected individuals. That's not low anymore, Jimo grinned and pushed open the door to the security room, wanting to see if there were any weapons he could use. The butler fell silent for a moment, then spoke up, "Sir, take off your headphones, hold them up with your hand and keep them away from you. Put them on again in 3 seconds. What's going on?" Jimo took off his headphones, held them up with one hand, and rummaged through the small security room with the other. Unfortunately, there was nothing destructive in the clear view of the security room. 3 seconds later, Jimo put the headphones back on his ears. "Sir, 7 zombies, 3 survivors." The butler calmly recounted the situation he had just detected. "Behind the bathroom on the left side of the playground, there is 1 zombie, and the remaining 6 are all in the room. On your left side, enter the second room where the 3 survivors are hiding. They have already been discovered by 2 zombies. They just moved the table to prevent zombies from breaking through the door. In the room on the far right, there are 2 zombies, 1 big and 1 small, far away from you. The remaining 2 zombie children are all in the hallway. If you have a fight with the 2 adult zombies at the door, it will inevitably attract the remaining 4 zombies in the room. Additionally," the butler's voice paused for a moment before continuing, "among those 3 survivors, 2 are children." Jimo was stunned for a moment, then smiled slightly and pulled the axe out of his waist, holding it in his hand and slowly reaching into the room. "Sir, based on comprehensive analysis, your survival rate this time is less than 10%. I suggest you evacuate immediately. This behavior is meaningless." "Is it meaningless?" Jimo smiled and said, "It really doesn't make much sense. Perhaps I should turn around and leave now, let myself live, that's the most correct way, but if you replace me with any Chinese man, in the face of today's situation, I believe they will not choose to leave. People are very interesting things, sometimes they are cowardly and selfish. But there are also many times when they are brave and fearless, knowing the outcome, but still willing to do so without hesitation. They are foolish, but also beautiful. These qualities, even in the apocalypse, I don't want to discard them. Perhaps in the future, I will encounter betrayal, indifference, and pay for my ridiculous thoughts. At that time, I may also become cold-blooded. But at least, now I don't want to actively give up those things that can be called human nature." "And, why is it meaningless?" "What you just said already gave me meaning, such as those 2 children." "I understand." The butler's voice suddenly became somewhat relaxed and seemed happy. "So, given this special situation, I can assist you with this operation." "Thank you." As he spoke, Jimo had already arrived at the door. Turning to his side, he could see 2 ugly zombies pounding their heads, constantly tapping the door of a confined room. 2 young children's zombies in the distant corridor were also attracted by the sound and looked curiously towards this side. Jimo held an axe in one hand and a recently picked up brick in the other, nervous and unable to breathe. "Aim the axe at your neck and strike. Your weapon is too rudimentary, only then can it be fatal. You have already received emergency training, no problem. If you are lucky, those 2 zombie children will not notice. They are too young to be infected, and their hearing after infection is far less sensitive than that of adult infected individuals, but if you are not lucky, just run." Jimo nodded. Although his knuckles were still white, his hand did not shake this time. 2 zombies once again raised their claws and slammed the door, and the butler's voice also sounded at the same moment. "Right now." Jimo's body rushed out with a swoosh, and the axe in his hand swung up, fiercely chopping at the neck of the zombie in front of him. Puzzle. Stinky blood splattered. Chapter 4. Dangerous situation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With a swing of the axe, Jimo's figure did not stop. Taking advantage of the fact that the other zombie had not yet reacted, a brick hit its face and forcefully slapped back the roar that was about to come out of its mouth. Zombies. Are you polite? Draw an axe, swing it, puff. A zombie's head adorned with half a brick fell to the ground in response. But the crisis has not been resolved yet. I didn't hear. Jimo looked at the two small zombies in the distance, silently praying in his heart. I don't know if prayer had an effect, but the two little zombies just looked up and lowered their heads in embarrassment, crawling aimlessly towards the other side. Thank you to Jesus, thank you to Buddha, thank you to the Virgin Mary, thank you to the great proletarian revolutionary party. Jimo's tense nerves relaxed, but faced the tightly closed door in front of him. He felt worried. How can he communicate with the people inside? Sir, just speak quietly, the butler explained to Jimo. The sound of those two zombies knocking on the door just now didn't attract them. Although the knocking was not loud, the volume was enough for you to communicate with the people inside the door. Oh, good. Jimo knocked lightly on the door twice, but his eyes were fixed on the few zombies in the distance. Is anyone there? Listening to Jimo's words, the butler couldn't help but feel speechless. This strange dialogue. After hearing Jimo's words, the people in the room fell silent for a moment, and then a soft and weak voice came out through the door panel. You. Who are you? Upon hearing the response, Jimo's face lit up and he whispered, I am a resident nearby who came here to search for supplies. I have already killed 2 zombies at the door. Hurry up and come out. There are several zombies next to us. Let's leave here quickly. The zombies have sensitive hearing and be careful not to make too much noise. Thank you. Thank you. The sound coming from inside the room clearly carried a hint of joy of surviving the disaster. Upon hearing the voice, it was still a very young girl. A faint sound of moving things quickly came from the room, and it was obvious that the people inside were moving the obstacles blocking the door. Jimo nervously stared at the 2 small zombies, afraid that they might move. Teacher Xiaohong, is someone coming to save us? Inside the room, 2 little dolls, one male and one female, about 4 or 5 years old, closely followed a girl in her 20s and 60s. The soft and tender little voice still had a slight tremolo, whether it was due to fear or hunger. Xiaoyu, be good. There are terrifying monsters outside, please don't make a sound and follow the teacher well. The girl named Xiaohong touched the heads of the 2 children and comforted them softly. Her originally delicate face was now a bit waxy yellow, and under the dual pressure of fear and hunger, she appeared exhausted. After all, there was not much food in this cabin. In 7 days, she almost evenly distributed all the food to her 2 children. If Jimo hadn't come, she might have either been infected as a zombie or starved to death. After comforting the 2 children, Xiaohong turned around and stood at the door, only 1 layer away from Jimo. She said, Sir, can we come out now? Well, come out. Jimo's eyes were still fixed on the 2 zombies and he didn't dare to relax, not paying too much attention to the details around him, which led him to make a fatal mistake. A mistake that could change his life. Xiaohong and her companions have been hiding in this room for a long time. When the zombie virus first broke out, this folding door withstood multiple violent impacts, but this also caused the upper folding of the door panel that should have been fixed to break. Squeak! As Xiaohong pushed open the door, a loud noise echoed through the entire corridor from the fold. The piercing sound was like a dinner invitation from the devil Satan. Oh no! Jimo's heart thumped as a chill surged from his heel towards the heavenly Lingai. Such a loud voice, those 2 zombie children should have heard even if they were deaf. As expected, the 2 small zombies, who used to have drooping heads, were now excited as if they had taken medicine. They raised their heads and shouted at Jimo and others, then quickly crawled over with both hands and feet. Run! Jimo pushed Xiaohong with a pale face, picked up a little girl following behind Xiaohong's buttocks with one hand, and rushed towards the door. The speed was so fast that even human traffickers who came before the end of the day had to bow down. Xiaohong also picked up another little boy named Xiaoyu and closely followed Jimo. The room where several people were trapped was very close to the door. Jimo rushed out of the door in 2 or 3 steps and closed the originally open glass door with a hook on his foot. Although he couldn't stop it, he could stop it for a while. Hurry up, flip through the school gate. Before Jimo could finish speaking, a dark shadow flashed past him and threw Xiaohong, who was holding the child, to the ground. The little boy named Xiaoyu also fell to the side. It's the zombie behind the restroom before. Jimo secretly let go of the little girl and kicked the zombie away from Xiaohong with a flying foot. He followed closely and without hesitation, struck with an axe, splashing red and white. You guys are okay. Bang! Before Jimo could finish speaking, the closed glass door had already been knocked open, and 4 zombies, 1 big and 3 small, rushed towards them together. Obviously, that sound attracted all the zombies. The 3 little zombies had excellent jumping power, and with just 1 kick of their limbs, they flew towards Jimo and the others, with a speed that was several points faster than that of the adult zombie. After not eating for a long time and suddenly being knocked down, Xiaohong's mind was filled with dizziness, and she had no resistance at all. As for those 2 children, they were only 4 years old. Do you consider them superpower dolls? I'll fuck you. Jimo exclaimed in his heart, aiming at a zombie cub in the air and throwing his axe. With a single blow, even if its speed is fast and there is no place to borrow power in the air, it can only become a live target. The axe was released, and Jimo immediately pulled out a very small art knife from the mountaineering bag. It was discovered on the counter when he left the store. At this moment, the adult zombie also pounced in front of Jimo, its roaring mouth emitting a foul odor. Jimo launches an art knife, waving his right hand and sealing his throat with 1 blow. But it was of no use. Black and foul-smelling blood flowed from the zombie's neck, and a knife of this length couldn't even cut half of its neck. Between lightning and fire, the zombie had already knocked down Jimo, with a big mouth about to bite Jimo's neck. Jimo struggled to resist with his thick mountaineering bag, and his knife-holding hand was firmly pressed under the zombie's body. A small zombie had just pounced on the little girl next to her, causing her to burst into terrifying cries. Chapter 5. Sorrow, Bright Red Blood. You are listening at novelfull.audio. My dream is to be a great hero. When there's danger, you'll hide behind me and I'll protect you. Xiaoyu, don't bully little Rain sister. Upon hearing the little girl's crying, Xiaoyu, who had fallen to the ground, got up and wrestled with the little zombie on the girl's body. Don't. Jimo's heart was filled with regret for his insufficient strength. If this continued, they would all turn into zombies here today. He came to save people, but now he has become like this because he is weak. I can't even deal with these few zombies. Why? He could have been more careful, he could have noticed the problem with the door. Why didn't he kill the lone zombie that affected the entire escape plan from the beginning? It's too late. It's too late. Jimo vigorously pulled out his suppressed right hand and suddenly felt the zombie lightly on his body, as if someone had pushed him. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jimo withdrew his right hand from under him and vigorously stabbed the head of the zombie on top of him with his art knife. Die for me. Even if the zombie rots severely, this small art knife cannot pierce the skull at the beginning, so Jimo stabbed the knife directly into the gray and white eyeball of the zombie, reaching directly to the brain. After all, there is no protection from bones here. Pup! His eyes burst open, and Jimo twisted his knife around the zombie's brain with a fierce expression, looking like a madman. Yellow-white brain plasma mixed with black and red blood flowed down the handle of the knife, dripping onto Jimo's hand and onto the ground. Sir, hurry up. The butler promptly awakened the somewhat insane Jimo. Jimo pushed aside the zombie whose brain had turned into a puddle, and looked to the side. The female teacher was lying next to Jimo, and just now she used all her strength to hit the zombie. At this moment, her left leg was bitten off by a small zombie, and her right ankle showed an abnormal twist. The little zombie was lying on her stomach, tearing and biting, as if trying to nibble on her internal organs. On the other side, the little boy Xiaoyu's arm had been bitten off by a zombie, but his only remaining hand was still hugging the zombie who wanted to harm his sister. The little girl Xiaoyu was lying not far away, already unconscious due to excessive fright. No, it shouldn't be like this. Jimo's face turned pale. This was the first time he had faced such a tragic scene, and he had saved them for less than a few minutes before, damn it. In room 0, the butler looked at the screen on the monitor with a gloomy expression, although he had no face. If I had known this situation would have happened, I shouldn't have let him go out wearing such a rudimentary communication device. The technological strength of this building far exceeds that of the world where Jimo is located. The system store of the building where Jimo thinks of mutated serum also has it, but it requires Jimo to unlock it bit by bit, and the butler has no ability to use it. Everything in this building belongs to Jimo, which was set from the beginning. But the existence of the butler can indeed use a small portion of resources beyond the current permissions of Jimo, but it did not expect such a thing to happen now. Jimo. Be sober, the butler shouted, his voice adding a hint of electric tremor, but miraculously calmed Jimo's mind. Jimo gritted his teeth and his voice squeezed out from between his teeth. Kill. He picked up the axe he had thrown before, and the nearest little zombie was still gnawing on little red teacher. The female teacher couldn't help but howl in pain, but she was unable to push the zombie off her body. Her face already had many blue raised blood vessels. The axe blade cuts through the air. The little zombie had just torn off a piece of meat from Xiaohong's body, lifted its head and swallowed it with a belt. In the next moment, its head twitched and fell to the ground. Without time to take a closer look, Jimo quickly came to Xiaoyu's side. At this moment, the brave little boy was about to die. The zombie he held in his arms bit his throat and sucked on his blood, but his hand still tightly hugged the zombie, preventing it from leaving his embrace. Seeing Jimo arrive, the little boy's eyes lit up for a moment, wanting to say something but only spewing out a mouthful of blood, and then his eyes became dim. He's dead. A line of tears fell from Jimo's face, onto the axe he swung and onto the head of the last little zombie. First. Sir. Ji Magang had just separated Xiaoyu's body from the zombie when he heard someone calling him. I'm here. Jimo approached Xiaohong, who was leaning against the dead adult zombie. Her belly and legs miraculously stopped bleeding, but one eye had turned gray and her face was covered in ferocious blood vessels. She's going to die, the butler's voice rang in Jimo's ear. The venom of the little zombie is not as strong as it is, that's why she was able to resist it for so long. But looking at it now, it won't last for a minute. Sir, I don't know your name yet. Seeing Jimo arrive, a poignant smile appeared on Xiaohong's face. Jimo, commemorative Jimo, silent Jimo. G.M.O. Xiaohong murmured, I beg you, kill me. I don't want to become those monsters. As she spoke, Xiaohong's body trembled for a moment, and her remaining eyes were stained with a lot of gray and white. She can't hold on anymore, the butler reminded. I'm dead, if the children are okay, I beg you to help me take care of them. I know this request is unreasonable, but please. At least don't leave them behind. I will repay you in the afterlife. Little Red's mind kept flashing with memories of teaching in kindergarten these years. Xiaoyu is always very mischievous and loves to fight, but he respects his teachers and treats his female classmates well. They used to love playing games. Xiaoyu wanted to be a hero, and Xiaoyu wanted to be a princess stolen by a dragon. Every time Xiaoyu loves to protect all the children behind him, shouting to the teacher who plays the role of a dragon, my dream is to be a great hero. When there is danger, you will hide behind me and I will protect you. At that time, Xiaoyu had bright eyes, firm gaze, a naive face full of innocent and innocent smiles, and pure courage that didn't know what difficulties were. Unfortunately, the teacher can't see you as a hero to protect us anymore. I promise you. Jimo slowly raised his axe, his voice a bit low. Thank you, whether it's at the beginning or at this moment, thank you. The female teacher smiled and closed her eyes, a crystal-clear tear streaming from the corner of her eye and falling to the ground. Along with the tears falling, there was also the axe held high by Jimo. Puzzle. The blood splashed out this time is bright red. Chapter 6. Shen Yumo. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. In the apocalypse, do not challenge the goodness and ugliness of human nature. Gmo, butler, this little girl. Jimo walked up to Xiaoyu and looked at the unconscious little girl, asking. Sir, I have scanned her and she has not been infected with corpse venom. That's good, Jimo reached out and held the little girl in his arms. He glanced at the bodies of Xiaohong and Xiaoyu again and walked out of the kindergarten without looking back. The sky is shrouded in dark clouds, with faint thunder coming. It's going to rain, sir, the panel mall has been opened to you, and you can temporarily borrow 2,000 rent to buy things. Advanced. Send me some benefits. Yes sir, there are some more functional outdoor communication devices in the store, as well as some strengthening potions. You can take a look. Butler. What's up, sir? After going back. Give me more training. Good. In 10 days the eastern region of Sea City, a lonely zombie wandered on the open street, lined with one scrapped vehicle after another, and the surrounding walls were covered in large, dark red bloodstains that had already dried up. Ah, the lonely zombie roared unconsciously, not knowing why. In recent days, its companion numbers have rapidly decreased, although there were originally not many zombies in this eastern region. Brushing, a blade flashed across. This zombie didn't react at all and was nowhere to be found. Behind it is a young man wearing a black shirt, holding a long knife, and with slightly long hair. Sir, you're cutting faster and faster. The young man with long hair swung a knife flower, shook off the blood and water on it, and then retracted the scabbard of the long knife from his waist. The gentle breeze blew through the young man's long hair, revealing a slightly green expression, and he was undoubtedly the protagonist of our book. Gmo. After returning from kindergarten last time, Jimo did not send Xiaoyu into room 1, but instead let him stay in other rooms in room 0. Although he really needs to unlock tenants and earn rent, he still doesn't trust a 4-year-old girl who has just experienced so many things to live alone in a room. Apart from taking care of the little girl on a daily basis, Gmo spent these 10 days in the tyranny of the butler. Since Jimo told the butler to strengthen the training, an extra room has been added to the training room on the second floor out of thin air. Staying inside for 4 days is equivalent to spending 1 day outside, while the 10 days outside are equivalent to Jimo having already spent 40 days. Of course, in these 10 days, Jimo hasn't come out all at once. In addition to training, he first returned to the kindergarten to bury the teacher and the little boy, and then spent over 1,000 yuan in the mall to buy a few bottles of forging fluid, which is said to have the effect of strengthening the body and increasing various attributes. In this way, Jimo, like going to work every day, takes care of Xiaoyu, exercises, goes out to search for supplies, and kills zombies, gradually expanding his activity range to the eastern area of Sea City. Butler, are you sure there are still survivors in that university? Jimo stood on the roof of an abandoned bus and looked at the distant university campus. Yes, sir. The butler's voice came from a cool-shaped earphone on Jimo's ear. Since the last accident, the butler has innovated Jimo's outdoor communication equipment, adding many functions to the new equipment, which is also why it can discover survivors. Sir, don't you go take a look. The butler's electronic synthesized voice clearly carried a hint of laughter. In fact, with the help of the butler, Jimo had already found 2 survivors before this. The first one was 2 brothers, about 30 years old, trapped in their own homes and afraid to go out without eating or drinking. When Jimo went up and provided food, the two of them felt malicious towards Jimo's abundant supplies. If it weren't for the butler's reminder, Jimo might have taken the dog with him a few days ago, and this novel would have ended. The second time was for a young couple in their 20s. With the first experience, Jimo even kept an eye on it, but unfortunately, it was of no use. After passing several tests by Jimo and successfully entering the building, the two of them hid in their room and began plotting to kill Jimo and Xiaoyu, taking possession of the building. Unfortunately, they didn't know that as long as there was a special artificial intelligence life in this building. And this time, it was Jimo's third encounter with survivors. Looking at Jimo, who had been motionless for a long time, the butler joked, "Sir, do you want to take another gamble? Are you really encountering someone as foolish as you this time? Or are you forced to kill someone? Butler, you're becoming more and more like a person now." Jimo smiled and jumped out of the car, saying, "What if I win this time and don't have to repay the loan? You're thinking about peaches." A mechanical fist reached out from the earphones and tapped Jimo's head. "You won, halved, I won, doubled." Cheng Gmo rolled up his hair, tied a rubber band around his head, and walked towards the campus. "I'll bet you again." At the same time, in an activity room of City University, about 10 college students were divided into two waves, fiercely confronting each other. These two groups of people are both wearing tattered school uniforms and look like students. One of them was led by a yellow-haired man with earrings on his ears. At this moment, he was smiling and holding two pieces of bread, gently tossing them in his hand. Across from him was a tall and beautiful girl. Although her face was dirty and her hair was like withered grass at the moment, he knew how beautiful the girl in front of him was before this damn end. "Shen Yumo, what are you angry about? My business is really worth it." Huang Mao grabbed the bread in his hand and said with a smile, "After sleeping, you can fill your stomach, open your legs, and survive. What a great deal. Damn it. Zhao Kai, don't go too far." A boy standing next to Shen Yumo shouted angrily, "If it weren't for Yumo saving you before, you would have died in the mouth of a zombie long ago. How could you have had the chance to speak here?" "That's it," said the only girl left in this room besides Shen Yumo. "It was Yumo who led us to find food and supplies. Now why are you taking over everything? That's ours." "What's yours?" "In my hands, it's mine." Huang Mao Zhao Kai shook his head and said, "If you can beat us, of course it can be yours. Oh, I almost forgot, you guys haven't eaten for several days, right? You're already hungry and have no strength now, right? Ha ha ha. How about this?" Zhao Kai's eyes lit up and he continued, "As long as you can persuade Shen Yumo, from us, each of you can eat a piece of bread and a bottle of water. How about that? Ha ha ha." Chapter 7. Selection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everyone is going to die, but before death, I still want to have some fun. Zhao Kai. After listening to Zhao Kai's words, the people who were originally surrounded by Shen Yumo were all taken aback. Then they turned their heads and looked at the beautiful girl standing in the middle of the crowd who had not spoken. Even the two people who had just spoken for Shen Yumo were no exception. The impulse and greed in everyone's eyes are extremely obvious. The girl calmly looked around, with an indescribable disappointment in her eyes. Although she had been living and dying together for more than 10 days, she now had to agree to that kind of request for the sake of stuttering. But it was indeed not their fault. "How's it going, Shen Mimi?" Zhao Kai couldn't conceal his lewd gaze. "I've endured it for a long time just to wait for this day." Shen Yumo chuckled lightly, his voice as clear as a oriole in the forest, but with a hint of coldness. "Even if you get me now, what can you do? Food is not enough for so many people to sustain for a few days. Why don't you think about expanding our safety zone to find more supplies, but rather about these things?" "Ha ha ha, expand the safety zone. Shen Yumo, you're too naive." Zhao Kai burst out laughing and said, when the virus first broke out, how many survivors did we have? Look at how many people are left to clean up this floor. There's only this food left, and I can't see any hope for survival. How could someone come to save us in this apocalypse? Our group of people, sooner or later, will either become corpses or starve to death. So why don't we leave some beautiful memories for ourselves before we die? Do you think so, Shen? And don't be so pessimistic, you guys haven't eaten for 3 days, have you? As long as you open your legs, you'll have something to eat, and there's still life to live. We're still happy. Isn't this a win-win situation? That's really sorry, maybe you won't be happy anymore. Yumo suddenly took out a small knife from his sleeve and stabbed it at his neck. Pop! Just as the knife was about to cut through her skin, a figure flashed past and knocked down the small knife in Yumo's hand, firmly grasping her 2 small hands. Yumo fixed his gaze, her beautiful eyes filled with sadness and anger. The person who prevented her from committing suicide to preserve her innocence was actually the boy who stood next to her and helped her speak at the beginning. Sun Peng. You. Shen Shuejia, although Sun Peng didn't eat for 3 days, his strength was still much stronger than that of the girl. He pulled Yumo's hands behind his back and clasped them, saying, "We haven't eaten for 3 days. Since you saved everyone before, let's save them all this time. After all, survival is the most important thing, isn't it? Feifei, do you think the same way?" Yumo turned his head to another girl. "There are 8 or 9 people here, do you think you might stay out of it? Sister Shen." Feifei lowered her head very low, seemingly guilty, but her words startled Yumo. If that's the case, you can exchange for water and food." I'm willing to exchange, whatever it is for me, as long as I'm alive, Sister Shen. For us, you should also follow Zhao Kai. Okay, it seems everyone is reasonable. Looking at the current situation, Zhao Kai smiled and almost grinned behind his ears. He stood up, put the bread and water aside, and walked towards Yumo. "Shen, although you can't die now, I still want to remind you that even if you die, we won't let go of your body. You." Yumo felt extremely angry and lifted his foot, suddenly kicking Zhao Kai between his legs. But as if he had anticipated, Zhao Kai grabbed Yumo's calf in his hand and squeezed it hard twice. The other hand lifted Yumo's chin and playfully said, "Shen is truly one of the top 10 beauties on campus in our school. Her body feels really good." Yumo pushed his face away from his hand, his expression becoming even colder in his eyes. "Let's not delay either. Brother, take off your pants, right?" Zhao Kai turned his head and shouted. The remaining boys in the room all chuckled and untied their waistbands, and the girl named Feifei consciously took off her already tattered clothes. As Zhao Kai looked at the boy who was controlling Yumo, he took off his pants and said, "Brother, you have made a great achievement this time. How about we work together later? In front of me, behind you." "That's really great, Brother Kai," the boy said excitedly. Woohoo! The people around cheered, but Yumo did not panic at all. Yumo's gaze slowly swept over the faces of everyone present, and after pausing for a moment on Feifei's face, which had already been stripped naked, he lowered his head again. "What's going on? Have you finally recognized reality, Shen?" Zhao Kai chuckled. "Yeah, I recognized you all." Yumo's voice was calm and cold. "Is that what you call reality? To vent your desires? Interestingly, can you tell me what reality is?" Zhao Kai threw away his pants and said, "Fight with zombies with you all. And then live in harmony and love like a big family, struggling to survive without seeing tomorrow or the future. The reason for persisting every day is that little bit of pitiful, invisible hope and fantasy. Don't tease me anymore. Instead of dying like that one day, I still choose to have a good time before death, can't I? Of course, and I also plan to make you feel a little better." As soon as Yumo finished speaking, a loud bang suddenly came to mind in the far hallway of the room, followed by a continuous crisp sound of cans falling to the ground. The sudden sound stunned everyone in the room. "Damn it! What did you do?" Zhao Kai grabbed the pants he had just thrown on the ground and shouted angrily, "Why are you all so stunned? Put all your pants on me. Get your weapons up." Everyone regained their senses and hurriedly picked up the stacked weapons. Of course, everyone who had been dealing with the zombies for so long knew what the clanging sound meant in today's environment. "Shen Yumo, you're so crazy. Do you want to pull us together even if you don't want to live?" Sun Ping also released his grip on Shen Yumo and nervously grabbed a wooden stick beside him. Fei Fei was even more panicked. She had just stripped herself completely, and now there was no time to put on her clothes, let alone grab defensive weapons. "If you have time to talk about me here, why don't you hurry up and set up the emergency defense line?" "Maybe there's still time," Shen Yumo said as he slowly retreated to the window. After the clanging sound, the faint roar of the zombies being attracted could be heard at the end of the corridor. Chapter 8. Encounter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As long as there is hope for survival, no one can face death directly. Shen Yumo, goodbye everyone. After speaking, Shen Yumo opened the window and jumped down, plunging into the artificial lake downstairs with a thud. The sound of falling into the water attracted several zombies wandering around. Grayish-white eyes stared at the rippling lake surface, and decaying lips wrapped around a few mottled yellow teeth, squeezing out an unconscious low growl. "Shen Yumo is dead. If you want to jump with me too, I won't stop you. There are more zombies outside than here. If you don't have the courage, hurry up and block the hallway with me." Zhao Kai scolded the stunned crowd with an unpleasant expression on his face. The further the defense line is established, the more safe space they have for activities and the more convenient they can cope with sudden dangers. They can certainly choose to block the door directly, but if possible, who wouldn't want to stay away from the danger? It's like Zhao Kai constantly muttering that he and others can't live, but when it's time to die, he wants to live more than anyone else. Outside, the zombies slowly approached the lake, their footsteps stumbling, perhaps with a hint of hesitation. Since falling into the lake, Shen Yumo has never surfaced again. At this moment, she is holding her breath and quietly lying at the bottom of the lake. She once tested that if a zombie is attracted by sound and no other sound is emitted within a minute, it will revert back to its original dementia-free state. However, the zombie that has returned to a state of dementia will not immediately leave its original position. At this moment, it depends on how long Shen Yumo can hold his breath at most. If you hold it for a long time, there is still a chance to live. If you hold it for a short time, then you can only expect miracles to happen. As time passed by, the zombies wandered around the lake in confusion, trying to determine the source of the sound, and their eyes became increasingly hollow. A tiny bubble bulged out from Shen Yumo's nose, slowly rising to the surface of the water, and then silently bursting again. This is a silent battle. In just 1 minute, Shen Yumo could barely hold on. 1 minute and 10 seconds, 1 minute and 20 seconds, 1 minute and 30 seconds later, Shen Yumo's face turned slightly purple, and even his consciousness began to blur. She knew she had reached her limit. If she didn't float up for a breath again, she would drown at the bottom of this cold lake. But how much better would the result of floating up be than now? Do you want to become the kind of decaying zombie who only knows how to roar and has no self-awareness? No, Shen Yumo's consciousness became increasingly blurred, but his body instinctively began to struggle to rise. The distance from the water surface is getting closer and closer, and even the hazy eyes can see the mottled light formed by the sun passing through the water surface, but consciousness is becoming darker and blurred. Are you going to die? Shen Yumo's mind suddenly flashed with this thought, and his consciousness completely sank into darkness. After an unknown amount of time, Shen Yumo slowly opened his eyes, and what caught his eye were the scattered forests by the lake and the fiery clouds formed by the final glow of the setting sun in the west. Am I still alive? Shen Yumo felt somewhat incredulous. Didn't he drown? How could it be on the shore? Where did those zombies go? Why didn't I turn into a zombie? Of course you're still alive, there's no big question. A deep voice suddenly came from the side, startling Shen Yumo. She looked up and followed the sound, only to see a young man wearing black clothes, a black mask, and hair that had not been trimmed for a long time. He was holding his arms and leaning against a nearby tree, watching her. Did you save me? Shen Yumo tried his best to prop himself up. In this apocalypse, Shen Yumo instinctively retained the most basic vigilance against this unfamiliar lifesaver, although her vigilance seemed to have little effect at the moment. Is that why you flew up from the water after you fell into a coma? The boy lowered his arm and looked up at the bright red sky. Those zombies have already died, but the sky is getting dark. If you don't leave quickly, more zombies will come later. By then, you will really be dead. Thank you. Shen Yumo shook his still slightly confused head, his previously dirty clothes still wet and sticking to them, outlining his perfect figure. Are you the only one here? The young man's gaze casually glanced over the building behind him, as if asking casually. Shen Yumo fell silent for a moment before saying, no, there are still a few people in the building behind, but... Oh. The boy let out a soft sigh and then turned his head and said, can't you leave? At most, there's an hour left, and it's getting dark. Oh. Good. Shen Yumo struggled to stand up and looked around, his eyes full of confusion. The escape plan came suddenly, and in this apocalypse, there is still an hour left. Where can she go? Still staring. The young man in black took 2 steps and saw that she hadn't followed, so he turned back and asked. My home is out of town. I have nowhere to go. Upon hearing these words, an imperceptible smile flashed in the boy's eyes, like a big bad wolf about to succeed in a deception plan. If you can trust me, then come with me. If I have any thoughts about you, then you should be standing in front of me naked now, not like this. Well. Thank you then, Shen Yumo nodded and extended his right hand, seemingly moved by the boy's words. My name is Shen Yumo. It's okay, the young man also reached out his hand and shook hands with Shen Yumo, saying, my name is Jimo. The evening breeze blows in the forest, and the sunset slowly sinks at the edge of the horizon. This is the first handshake between Shen Yumo and Jimo, which may also represent the birth of the first tenant. Then let's go. Jimo lightly shook his hand and released it, turning around and walking towards the outside of the school. My safe house is some distance away from here, I hope there's still time before it gets dark, he said, okay. Shen Yumo responded and closely followed behind Jimo, with a slight decrease in vigilance and unease in his eyes. She didn't know that Jimo had just tested her, but at the same time as Jimo was testing her, was she also testing Jimo? In the apocalypse, some people may remain calm and rational, but as the pressure increases, this rationality becomes increasingly fragile. In days without signals, there is no other way to vent stress, and people's desires become stronger. Zhao Kai and the classmates in that room are the best examples. Shen Yumo was too aware of the killing power of his current appearance, but Jimo's performance at least proved that he still maintained basic rationality. Chapter 9. Final Exploration. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There will always be some unpleasant things in life. Instead of struggling with them, it's better to work hard to satisfy oneself. Jimo. The setting sun slanted down, and the shadows of the two on their way home were stretched to an extreme length. Crossing abandoned cars and streets covered in dried-up blood, shattered high-rise buildings have gradually shifted to the back. Is your safe house in the suburbs? Shen Yumo looked at Jimo without stopping and couldn't help but ask softly. Well, it's almost here. Jimo didn't turn back and looked around cautiously. Although the surrounding zombies had already been cleared by him several times, he still couldn't take it lightly. The cool evening breeze blew on Shen Yumo's soaked clothes, causing him to shiver uncontrollably. Jimo didn't turn back or speak, just slightly quickened his pace forward. Along the way, there was no danger. As the sun was about to sink below the horizon, Jimo and his companions finally returned to the entrance of the apartment. As the apartment gate opened, a small figure appeared at the entrance holding a plush toy. "Brother Jimo. You're back." Xiaoyu threw down the plush toy and ran towards Jimo, who also put down his backpack to pick up Xiaoyu, who was running over. "Did Xiaoyu behave well today? Did you feel bored?" "With toys to play with, how could I be bored?" Xiaoyu looked at Shen Yumo and quickly said. Gmo was stunned for a moment, and a hint of approval flashed in his eyes. "Come in," Gmo waved to Shen Yumo. Before they returned, the butler had already adjusted the original layout of the building to look no different from ordinary apartments. "Xiaoyu, this is Sister Shen Yumo. She will live with us in the future," Jimo said with a smile as she put Xiaoyu back on the ground. "Hello, Sister Shen Yumo." Xiaoyu blinked her big eyes and had a milky voice. "Hello Xiaoyu," Shen Yumo responded with a smile. "Xiaoyu, please go back to your room to play first. I'll settle down with Sister Shen Yumo before I go find you." Jimo gave Xiaoyu a look. The little girl nodded and bounced away. "Is she your sister?" Looking at Xiaoyu's back, Shen Yumo curiously asked. "No, I found her at a kindergarten." Jimo walked into the room and waved his hand to signal Shen Yumo to follow. "There was also a little boy and a female teacher at the time, and I couldn't save them." I'm sorry." "There's nothing to be sorry for," Gmo smiled and said, "rather than feeling sad and regretful for someone you couldn't save, it's better to focus on those who have already been saved. Life always has its ups and downs, and instead of going against them, it's better to work hard to satisfy yourself." Shen Yumo didn't speak, just stared blankly at Jimo. Compared to the despair and self-abandonment of his previous classmates, the young man in front of him seemed to have an indestructible hope. This feeling seemed to be everywhere before the end of the world, but in such a long time after the end of the world, it seemed to be the first time Shen Yumo had seen such hope in someone else. As they spoke, the two had already arrived at a tightly closed door. The number 001 written on the door represents the first tenant's check.in. "That's it here." Jimo pressed his finger on the doorknob, and with a beep, the brown door slowly opened. The furnishings in the room are no different from the king-size room in the Express Hotel. "From now on, you will stay in this room. My room is room 000 in the middle of the corridor. You can come to the living room for breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning. Do you have any taboos?" "Eating. Taboos." Shen Yumo felt that his brain was running low. How long has it been since the outbreak of the end of the world that she hasn't heard such words? A piece of bread and a sip of water can make those struggling classmates betray themselves, but now, according to Jimo's words, he seems to be still eating stir-fried vegetables. "What are you thinking?" "I'm talking about self-heating hot pot." Oh. That. I don't have any dietary restrictions." "Oh, okay, then I'll leave first. If you have anything, you can come find me." Gmo closed the door and walked towards his room. Actually, according to the butler's account, Jimo can exchange food and other supplies in the store, and there may even be a planting area on the 3rd floor. However, Jimo's current permissions are not enough. Returning to room 000, Jimo found Xiaoyu waiting for him at the door. "What's wrong, Xiaoyu?" Jimo pulled Xiaoyu onto the sofa and asked softly. "Brother Jimo, will that sister be like those older brothers and sisters before?" Gmo fell silent for a moment and slowly spoke up, "I don't know either. I feel like Sister Shen is different from those people before, but Xiaoyu can't say it." Xiaoyu blinked and said. Then I'll borrow your auspicious words. Jimo smiled and rubbed Xiaoyu's head. But Xiaoyu still needs to remain vigilant until it's completely confirmed that Sister Shen is staying in. Xiaoyu nodded hard and said, I know. Sir, come here. The butler's mechanical synthesizer suddenly came out of the bedroom. Xiaoyu, please stay here obediently. Jimo smoothed out Xiaoyu's messy hair, got up, and walked into the bedroom. Sir, welcome back. The butler transformed a smiling face on the screen. Did she see that knife? She saw it, sir. The butler's voice fell, and the scene in room 001 immediately appeared on the screen. Shen Yumo was lying on the bed in the picture, unsure of what he was thinking. A cold and shining dagger was placed in the second drawer of the bedside table that had been opened. Sir, I'm a bit confused because based on the data and your personality analysis, you shouldn't ignore those people in school. Although there is a bet between us, it doesn't seem like a choice you can make. Is that right? Jimo smiled and said, it's nothing to do with gambling. With light rain around now, I'm not alone or lonely. After the first two incidents, I sometimes wonder if I have the ability to save all the survivors. In the apocalypse where there is no future, no law, no hope, the evil in people's hearts is infinitely magnified, they become twisted, selfish, crazy, and difficult to understand. To be honest, I understand them very well, but not only for my own survival, but also for the sake of light rain. There are some people I can try to save, but some people, perhaps making them turn into zombies in the end is more correct than letting them live. Sir. That knife. That's the last test, whether we can welcome the first tenant depends on her own choice. Jimo's half-face disappeared in the darkness, looking like a villain. Chapter 10. Another choice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Since the beginning of the apocalypse, Shen Yumo has never felt so peaceful sleeping. Open your eyes, the pristine white sheets, neat walls, and the ability to take a shower or use the restroom. Don't worry about what to eat, there's no constant low roar of zombies in your ear. The early morning sunlight shone through the window into the room, painting everything inside with a touch of gold. Everything seemed calm and peaceful, as if the end had never begun, which made Shen Yumo feel a sense of confusion. Turning his head, Shen Yumo saw the dagger in the bedside table again. She was not sure if this was a probe, as if she had never figured out why Jimo did not choose to rescue when she found out that there were still survivors in the teaching building. But now, this choice is also in front of her. Should I pick it up or treat it as if I haven't seen it? There is abundant resources here, and only the three of them. The betrayal of his classmates echoed in Shen Yumo's mind, holding his breath alone at the bottom of the lake to avoid the helplessness and fear of zombies. But similarly, the figures of Jimo and Xiaoyu also flashed through her mind. Do you want to trust them again? Shen Yumo understood that this was a choice. For someone he had just met, although he saved his own life, in this apocalypse, she still couldn't gain complete trust. At least she couldn't make a decision to completely hand over her life to someone else at the moment. So Shen Yumo picked up the dagger, pinned it on his waist, and walked towards the living room. In the living room, Jimo had already sat on the dining table, and the self-heating hot pot on the table was steaming hot, waiting for Shen Yumo's arrival. How to say it? Jimo wore a pair of headphones in his left ear, which were not prominent under the cover of his hair. She's carrying that dagger, the butler's voice came from his earphones. As he spoke, Shen Yumo had already sat at the dining table. Jimo pushed a box of self-heating hot pot over and said, I don't know what flavor you like. It's a bit spicy, can you accept it? Oh, that's okay. Shen Yumo nodded, took the hot pot and chopsticks, and lowered his head to eat. Where's Xiaoyu? Why didn't you see her? Oh, children, they wake up relatively late. Jimo nuzzled his lips towards room 000 and said, I'll do it for her later. Oh, Shen Yumo continued to lower his head to eat, and the atmosphere at the dining table became somewhat silent for a moment. Jimo's gaze remained on Shen Yumo, his eyes slightly narrowed, not knowing what he was thinking. Jimo, are you still going out to search for supplies today? It seemed that he couldn't bear Jimo's gaze, and Shen Yumo broke the silence first. Yes, I also want to inquire about the news of other survivors. Jimo nodded and said, although the zombie outbreak was very sudden, I believe there must be many people surviving, and even establishing bases under the protection of the military. I want to try to find them. This building is very safe. Do you want to stay here or go out with me? Shen Yumo paused for a moment and said, I would like to stay here for a few days, is that okay? Of course. Jimo smiled, but his smile seemed a bit playful. When I go out, Xiaoyu will ask you to take care of me. I will come back soon and show you around here. Jimo stood up and walked towards the room. I'll go call Xiaoyu and also prepare some equipment for going out. Could you please, On? No, it's not troublesome. Without you, I probably would have been a floating corpse in the lake now, Shen Yumo shouted as he looked at Jimo's back. Sir, can you rest assured to hand over Xiaoyu to her? After leaving Shen Yumo's sight, the butler suddenly asked, You don't have the official permission to open the store yet, nor do you have enough rent to exchange for my various purposes of the machine. After you leave, I won't be able to provide timely protection for my aunt. Of course not, Jimo shook his head. But who said I'm going out? So you. I remember you told me that I now have all the permissions for the first layer, and you can adjust the layout of the first layer according to my mind. Of course, sir. Isn't that enough? Jimo said as he opened the door to room 000, I'll go out through the main door in a moment. You can get me a back door from behind this house and directly lead to this room. If there's anything wrong with her, Xiaoyu's safety can also be guaranteed. Okay, sir. The butler's voice hesitated a bit. But to be honest, I don't think this kind of probing has any effect. Based on data analysis, she wouldn't have chosen to take such a risk, whether it's emotional or rational. Butler, do you seem to have become stupid? Jimo carried his backpack on his back, dressed completely like he was going out to explore. I also don't think Shen Yumo would do this, but I just want her to make a choice that can completely reassure me about her. Choose. Well, it's like I didn't bring back that group of students yesterday. If I had saved them all, they would have been many and knew each other. Humans are social animals, and when alone, they may have been afraid, but if it were a group of people, they could have bravely done many things they used to be afraid to do. So, it's highly likely that they will choose to take action against you and Xiaoyu like those people before. The butler's voice returned to its previous coldness and calmness. Yes, I can't take that risk with light rain, Jimo nodded. The butler interrupted Jimo's words and continued, but if it were only Shen Yumo alone, the probability of this choice would be infinitely reduced, because she still retains reason and sensibility, and is very intelligent. Whether it is her gratitude for your life-saving kindness or the weighing of the pros and cons of attacking you, she will not make the same choice as those before. Is that what Sir thinks? Bingo. Correct answer, Jimo smiled and snapped his fingers. That dagger, she can choose to attack me, or she can choose to threaten me with light rain, but she can also keep it for herself, or choose to gradually believe in me, just like a friend. And all of these choices are in her Shen Yumo's mind, and I believe she will make the right choice. Sir. You're a bit different from before. Is that right? Jimo scratched his head and said, No, right. You've become able to live longer in the apocalypse, the butler thought silently, and the past I'm talking about is not the one you think of, Jimo.